Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Werner Safety Stand Down webinar on fall protection. My name is Kevin Denis. I'll be your presenter here this afternoon. If you saw the advertisement that myself and Chad Lingerfelt were going to be in attendance, unfortunately, Chad is on another presentation here this afternoon, so it will just be me. If you want to bring up my presentation, that would be fantastic. All right, like I said, welcome to the Werner Safety Stand Down webinar. It's titled Understanding the Importance of Fall Protection, the A, B, C, D, and E's. My name again is Kevin Denis. I'm in the Werner Division of Fall Protection in the Technical Service Department. And we're going to spend 30 minutes here today talking fall protection in general. We are live, so all of the standard webinar rules apply. We've muted everybody's microphones and video cameras. But I do encourage you to please make use of the chat feature and the Q&A feature on the side of your screen there. Is at the conclusion of the presentation, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have about Werner products, and anything related to fall protection, OSHA, state programs, ANSI, whatever you may need. And I'm more than happy to stay on at the conclusion of the session to answer any questions that you may have. All right. So 2 weeks ago was nationwide safety stand down. It is an OSHA initiative to bring awareness to the fall hazards that are encountered at the workplace. So although this webinar is a week and a half after that stand down, it's really just an extension of that event. So our purpose here is to increase somebody's awareness of fall hazards, how some of the gear works, what are some of the details about using fall arrest systems, and hopefully, elevate people's awareness to working up at heights a little bit. So you don't have to go very far, especially during the stand down month, to see some statistics about fall accidents, fall related accidents. And what I've got up here is the OSHA top 10. And these are the top 10 citations that OSHA had written within a calendar year. And number one is fall protection. That's why it's top billing and it gets its own week of recognition. But unfortunately, it's been in the top spot. I think this is either the 11th or 12th year, hence why we do these types of events to increase people's awareness, as nobody wants you to fall at work. So although it's in number one, I'd also bring your attention to 4, 5, and 8, as they are also related to working up at heights. And that's where Werner comes in. We hope that you can use us as a resource, whether it's for PPE, fall protection equipment, scaffolding, ladders, or even training events. 2 weeks ago, our JSS team, did over 300 fall protection training events and awareness events. And we, impacted over 25,000, people and their employers. So we've got a lot of resources available to you, things like this that we can certainly help out with this. But working up at heights, I understand that OSHA citations certainly aren't a good benchmark for how prevalent fall protection is. But, looking at that stat, it accounted for over, 48% of all of the citations written. So it is a big deal. And although this session doesn't replace your actual hands-on training, of what your employer does for you before you put your harness on and work up at height, hopefully, like I said, you get something out of it. So what we're going to do today is talk the fall protection alphabet, the A, B, C, D, and E's. If I only have a short period of time, what would I want to tell somebody? It would be this. There isn't anything OSHA related or legal about the alphabet, the A, B, C, D, E's. It's just a little way that people can use to hopefully have users remember some of the detail about harness-based systems. All right. When you're working up at heights and you have a guardrail, you don't have to do anything for that guardrail to protect you. Once it's up and it's there, it passively protects you. You don't have to do anything, engage it, connect to it, start it up, inspect it. It's part of the structure. So unfortunately, when you go to a harness-based system, there's all of these little things you have to remember. Where's my anchor? How strong is the anchor? How high is the anchor? Is the harness on right? Is it the right harness? Where do I connect? What hook do I use? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the A, B, C, D, and E's is just a way to try and organize all of those little bits. And what I'm going to do here on this session is is go through what I believe are the highlights of each of these sections. Okay, so let's start with the anchorage. The anchorage is basically the structure that you're connecting to. If there was one thing, I had to tell somebody about the anchorage, it would be this. It's that secure point. And your harness has to be connected to structure that is strong enough. It's in the right location, and it's ultimately going to hold if you fall into that location. So here in this slide, the anchorage is the red steel. That column. We might not know exactly how strong it is, but for that column to fail, I have bigger problems than my fall protection system. So that is a good anchorage because it's load bearing, it's structural, it's inarguable as to how strong it is. So OSHA does have laws about your secure point, about that anchorage. And I'd want everybody to keep in mind of 5,000 pounds. OSHA requires that your anchorage that you're connecting to is be rated at 5,000 pounds. Now, we completely understand and recognize that many times you don't have an engineer pre-qualifying that anchor, or you don't walk around with a come along and a load cell to proof load all anchorages. But even if the anchorage isn't pre-qualified, I still like people to remember that 5,000 pounds. It's a big number. It should be indicating to you things like this I-beam that you want to connect to. So in a perfect world, somebody has pre-certified or pre-selected all of these anchorages for you. Okay, that secure point, is been certified to 5,000 pounds. Once you find that location, ideally it's above your head. And when you work, you stay underneath it as closely as possible to prevent any type of increase in fall distance or swing fall. So when you do find that anchorage, it could be a number of things. It could be concrete, it could be column, it could be steel, it could be piece of equipment, it could be the ground. We have to find a way to interact with it. We have to find a way to connect to it. Werner has several different families of anchorage connectors, and they all accomplish the same thing of capturing or connecting to that structure. There's the wraparound family, where there's usually a little D-ring that goes into the big D-ring, and it can be wrapped around columns, can be wrapped around beams, can be wrapped around pieces of equipment, framework, basically anything structural, both in cable and synthetics. There's the fasten into family of anchorage connectors that either nail down, screw down into wood, metal, basically any type of structure that we can screw into. There's a whole family of concrete anchors, 5K, 10K, and they're reusable or semi-permanent or even permanent, but they can be embedded into concrete providing we get the requisite strength out of it. Same thing with drill through anchors that have, when there are pre-existing holes already in structural steel or concrete that you can take advantage of. Then there is the connect to family, and those are beam clamps, fixed beam anchors, sliding beam anchors. Anytime that there's some kind of structure, we can connect to it in that manner. So with the anchorage, in the same manner as I tell you here are the qualities of a good anchorage, I think it's always beneficial to take a couple of seconds to talk about the qualities of bad anchorages. All right, so you want to avoid things that are not structural. We could go on for days about what is acceptable and what isn't, but generally speaking, you avoid non-structural elements. Electrical, conduit, fire suppression, water piping, clamps, cable trays, bus bars, ladder rungs, portable ladders, most handrails, guardrails, wood members. What I hope that everybody accomplishes here with the A part of the ABCs is think big. Think big, think overhead, where nobody's going to argue about the location or the strength of that anchor point. All right, so that brings us to the B, which is the body holding device. It's essentially your harness. And there are thousands, if not tens of thousands of options available to you when it comes to a harness. So if there was one element or one thing that I would want to talk about for a minute or two about a harness, it would be this word right here, and that's containment. Of those 10,000 harnesses, they all have the same primary purpose of containing, of holding on to that person's body. If they should fall, we want to make sure that their upper torso, the pelvis is contained so that they don't fall out of it. And we put all of that fall arrest energy into the biggest bones and the strongest part of their body, which is the pelvis area and the upper thighs. So containment is the primary function of harness. When you connect a harness, OSHA, both in construction and general industry, discuss where to connect. You know, the location shall be in the center of the wearer's back. In general industry, there is some tolerance for connecting to the front D-ring. So it depends on the system that you're using, but I want everybody to remember the containment part. Okay, this whole arrangement of straps, you know, if it isn't on correctly or adjusted correctly, now you're starting to affect the primary function of that harness, which is containment. This is the Werner Pro form. There's a aluminum lightweight D-ring in the back. It's got a construction belt with 2 work positioning D-rings on the side. You can get them with front D-rings or loops. You can get them with confined space. Again, tens of thousands of variations of harnesses that you can use. But whether you're using them to hang from directly from the harness or in a chair, or you're using them to climb a ladder safety system, or, you know, tying rebar, you're tied off in positioning, they all have the same function of containment. So unfortunately, even today, one of the biggest challenges or greatest challenges with a harness is just having people take the time to adjust them. There's a lot of misconceptions out there. You hear people that it gets in my way, it's extra weight, I can't do my job, I don't want to wear that harness, it's going to catch me in the private parts. There's all kinds of misconceptions. And I get it. We are adding weight. It's another piece of equipment. It's certainly just like a tool belt is going to get in your way. But just like a new pair of shoes, the more you work with it and you get it adjusted and get it fit correctly for you, you know, after a few hours, it becomes normal. So try to avoid doing stuff like this. You know, this fella has slid his dorsal D-ring, which should be up between the shoulder blades. He slid that all the way down to the small of his back. And I know why he did it. It's so he can reach behind more easily and make a connection. But if he should fall head first or sideways, there is a chance that those shoulder straps, you know, separate and he falls right out of the entire harness. Or if he does, luckily enough, become contained, he's going to end up horizontal or maybe upside down because the majority of his body weight is higher than that D-ring, so he's going to tend to want to turn upside down or be bent in half. So that's why I like to focus on containment. You know, there's a lot of people focus on, is it the right color? Is it comfortable? Is it stretch webbing? Have I got the right D-rings? And then when you go out into the field, you see them being worn incorrectly. Let's get containment down first, and then we can work on the secondary objectives. So they're certainly important, but again, if I only have a few minutes to talk about a harnesses, what would it be? I want to pound home adjustment and wearing them correctly. All right, so that's the A's. A is the anchorage, think big, anchor overhead. B is the harness, your body holding device, wear it correctly, get the right D-rings. C is the connecting device, okay? So if I have to define the connecting device, what is it? It's all of the equipment in between the full body harness and the anchor point. Okay. So whatever is connecting to the harness and connecting that worker to the anchor point, that's basically is in the family of connectors. The connecting device is the part of the system that affects how far you fall and your force when you hit. So if there's one thing I want to talk about connecting devices, it's this right down here. Is that 1,800 pounds. Obviously, when somebody's wearing a piece of equipment and they fall, we can't injure them in the process. People are injured by contacting structure during or at the end of a fall, or they're injured by the amount of force their body has to be exposed to as a result of the fall. So there's 2 things that we can do to keep this force under acceptable levels. And they're kind of mentioned in the OSHA regulations as well, as they fall arrest system shall be rigged that a employer can either fall 6 feet, okay, and or contact any lower level, and they have to bring an employee to a stop and limit the deceleration distance to 3.5. So what we're doing here is to reduce force, we reduce the free fall distance, and we increase the deceleration distance. And that's what the connecting device does. Is if I'm, I have an anchor point 4 feet above my head, but I have an 8-foot lanyard, I'm going to fall that distance before that lanyard becomes taut. That's what the free fall distance is. So a 200-pound person falling 4 feet isn't going to generate as much energy as a 200-pound person falling 8 feet. Makes perfect sense. So to keep the systems as safe as possible, we reduce the free fall force, or sorry, the free fall distance. Shorten your connector, anchor overhead higher, and then increase the deceleration distance. So think of bungee jumping. This is always a good analogy that I use to explain it, because it can confuse a lot of people. I can go to a county fair, pay my $80 and jump off of a crane. How is that system made safe, or enjoyable? So when I jump off that crane, I'm going to fall a certain distance before that bungee cord becomes tight. That's the free fall distance. During that distance, I'm picking up speed. I'm generating more kinetic energy. I have a bigger problem when I come to the end of that line, the further I free fall, because there's more energy potential. But once that bungee cord becomes tight and it begins to stretch, I'm no longer picking up speed. I'm actually slowing down. I'm braking. I'm decelerating. So the bungee cord system at the county fair is made safe by having more deceleration distance than free fall distance. And there's a lot of stretch in that line as we slow the person down very, very gently, just like stopping a car. When I'm on the gas, I'm increasing, I'm accelerating. That car has got a lot of more stored energy. But once I let off the gas and apply the brake, that energy is being dissipated. I'm actually slowing down. So that's what the connecting devices do. Okay? They connect you to the anchor, and then they also affect your free fall and deceleration distance to keep the forces on your body below 1,800 pounds. All right. When a connecting device is connecting to an anchor point, I always want to take, a minute and talk about this snap hook right over here. It's called a non-locking snap hook. Unfortunately, they were the very first snap hook that was put out decades ago with all this fall protection equipment. They can come undone. It's called rollout. They are illegal. They shouldn't be used. And I've been to a lot of job sites, and you won't find any manufacturer in North America selling these anymore. But if you look deep enough in the job box or the back of the truck or in the shop, these snap hooks find a way of just sticking around and creeping around. So I always like to take just 30, 40 seconds and show everybody the risks with them. So if I look at my pictures here, starting with the left, this is how the hook is supposed to be used. It's loaded across the spine. That's a good connection. It's correct. But if I have that hook and it just, works its way up and around, that's why it's called rollout, is the hook kind of rolls over that D-ring or rolls over that anchor point. With a couple of pounds of force, you can see all of the pressure is right there on the gate, and then the whole thing just comes undone. So if you see any of these hooks, they are illegal, they are unsafe, they are dangerous. Please take them out of service and put them, turn them in, or whatever your company's process is for retiring them. All right. But now let's get to the different types of connectors. The very first family of connectors were lanyards. These are the two more popular styles. They're fall arrest lanyards. They're locking snap hooks on either end, various sizes and shapes. They have built-in energy absorbers. Whether it's an external pack or it's internal to the webbing, when somebody falls on these, they have built-in bungee cords. Okay? They're not bungees. You don't bounce, you don't recoil, but they have an energy absorber built into the unit that it dissipates and it adds deceleration distance. Okay. Typically, they're all 6 feet in length, all kinds of different features, twin legs, large hooks, rebar hooks, carabiners. Again, hundreds and hundreds of variations of fall arrest lanyards. Other lanyards are positioning lanyards. They look the same, but what they don't have is the energy absorber in the webbing. So these are for restraint systems or positioning. You shouldn't fall into these because there isn't any type of deceleration device. All right. Challenge with lanyards is they're pretty short. Okay. You have to have your work. There has to be an anchor within 6 feet of your work. And because the longest lanyard you can get, there are longers, but the most small are 6 feet. So another connecting device are what's called self-retracting lifelines. SRLs, SRDs, retractables, yo-yos, reels, safety brakes. They go by several different names, but the idea is this part attaches to the anchor point, this part connects to the harness, the whole line pays out and retracts, and inside of that little housing is a speed brake. So when somebody falls, the line gets pulled out at a certain speed and it locks up. Okay? They come in all different types and sizes. Currently, there's 2 classes, A and B, and without getting into finite detail, the class A are typically your smaller units. 11, 12 feet is about all you're going to see with these. They can anchor to the back of the harness or flip around and be up on the anchor point. And then the class Bs are the larger units, anywhere usually from 20 to I think 130 feet is the biggest one you can buy in the United States. The smaller ones, the class A, they lock up in 2 feet, have an arresting force of 1,350 pounds. They lock up so quickly you don't get the chance to generate thousands and thousands of pounds. And most of them have an internal brake or an external little shock absorber. The larger units, they take a little more time to react, which means more fall distance. They lock up in 4.5 feet, excuse me, and they usually have an internal brake so we can get the forces down a little better to 900 pounds. Another type of self-retracting lifeline that requires a few minutes of discussion are the LEs, just because they're so popular and they are so different than a standard self-retracting lifeline. Okay. The LE variations of these are called leading edge. They're designed to be anchored at foot level when somebody is working a forward edge, and if they fall off the edge, the unit's going to lock. So they work in the exact same manner other than being anchored at foot level. So what I want everybody to recognize is that when I anchor at foot level, forgive my drawing here, when I anchor at foot level, whatever this distance here is an increase in fall distance, which is typically around that 5 to 6 foot mark, depending on the height of the person. Okay? So they still work. They're very user friendly because that line pays out and retracts. On the floor, I can always find an anchor. I can land it into the concrete, or there's usually some type of column inside that construction floor. But there's just some structure, so it's very easy to use these. But I would encourage everybody to make sure you exhaust all your other options before you automatically default to an LE. Guardrails eliminate all of these challenges. Overhead anchors are much better from a performance point of view. Fall restraint systems prevent a fall entirely. I don't have to worry about the extra fall distance and the introduction of whatever that edge is, okay, because I'm purposely having that line contact that edge. So there are tests for these. ANSI requires that they be tested on a steel beam. Werner goes a couple of steps further, and we also test them on not only the steel beam, but concrete and metal edges as well. Another type of connector is positioning lanyards. If you're ever climbing and you're working on rebar or towers or telecom or scaffolding, or anytime you're tempted to let go of the structure so you can tie something, make a connection, that's where positioning lanyards come in. You have to have a harness with hip D-rings or a front sternal or ventral D-ring, but that's where these lanyards come in, is they connect you to the structure and you can work hands-free. Rope and rope grabs are another connecting device. Lanyards are often too short. Self-retracting lifelines might be limited in length. They are expensive and there is a maintenance bit to them. Whereas rope and rope grabs I can protect long distances and they're relatively inexpensive. There's two types. They're manual and automatic, or trailing and manual, or you can call them also vertical and sloped. I anchor my lifeline, whether it's in the vertical or on the horizontal. The manual grabs are well suited for the sloped and horizontal applications because they stay locked in place. Whereas the automatic rope grabs, also called trailing rope grabs, they will follow the person as they climb. So if you're climbing a tower, elevator shafts, outside of a building, exterior scaffold, and you don't want to be letting go and moving your rope grab all the time, you get a trailing rope grab. All right. And one of the last connectors I want to talk about are horizontal lifelines. Sometimes there's a need for horizontal movement. You know, these mini fall arrest systems are kind of vertical only, where you got to work in a limited space underneath that anchor. But if I can tension or run a line in between two anchor points and move along the length of that line, I get an incredible amount of freedom of movement. They're very versatile. I can get systems that are from 1 to 2 people for fall arrest, and even 3 or 4 people for travel restraint. So they're very user friendly. If there was one thing I'd want to talk about on horizontal lifelines, it's don't build your own. When I tension a line, or not even tension a line, which is when I string a line between 2 points, and I pull down in the middle of that line or in between those 2 anchors, I can have some pretty outrageous forces being generated into those end anchors. Okay. So if 2 people just grab a come along and some cable and fist grips and start tensioning ropes and cables around 2 anchor points without testing or verifying what the loads on the end anchors are, it can be quite dangerous. OSHA recognizes that, and they say, don't build your own, go and get yourself a qualified person. The easiest way around this law or complying with this law is just using pre-manufactured horizontal lifelines. You know, the Werner system has got a tensioning device, so you always get the rope to the right tension. There's a built-in energy absorber to control the forces on the end anchors, as well as everybody else's system, you know, as well. All right. Near the end, I appreciate it. I'm down to the last couple of minutes. So now we're moving on to the D. The ABC is the anchor, body holding device. C is the connector. The D and the E is descent control, rescue, and education. They aren't physical elements of a system like an anchor, connector, and a harness is, but they are just as important. When you have a person in a fall arrest system, OSHA requires that the employer provides a prompt rescue of employees. And it's unacceptable if somebody falls, they're hanging in their fall arrest system, and there isn't a plan to get them back up to the structure or down to the ground. OSHA's opinion, you know, is that people are being issued equipment, you know where they're working, you've identified an anchor point. If they fall, we can predict pretty accurately where they're going to end up. Therefore, we can also have an evacuation, escape, or rescue plan. Okay, so don't just stop after C. Ask yourself, what is the descent or rescue plan? All of these rescues take some time, whether it's a coworker rescue or a 911 rescue. That's why Werner has put a neat feature in all of their harnesses above the baseline called the chair in the air. Okay, to increase the tolerable suspension time and decrease the effects of harness-induced trauma or suspension trauma. There's these handholds, okay, or handles on the subpelvic strap of all of our harnesses. So somebody can just lift their legs and then slide the subpelvic strap underneath their buttocks. And what it does is it takes the tension off of the femoral artery on the inside of your inner thighs and your groin area. So when you hang from that back D-ring, you tend to hang forward and all the weight is on the front of your legs, and it begins to dramatically affect the circulation. So if the person's able to, they can lift their knees, slide these down, and now all of the weight isn't on your inner thighs. You can see here in the picture, it's underneath his buttocks, and you can sit there for quite a long time, just like sitting in a chair. Okay, so it's a neat feature that I always try to mention. All right. So if there's one thing I wanted to highlight about rescue, it's pre-planning. Okay, have a plan. OSHA doesn't require you to what that plan is, but on construction sites, using lifts is completely acceptable if they work. And what I mean by work is that you can reach that person that's suspended. It's completely acceptable to throw them a rope if they're conscious and pull them back into the building where they can just climb into a window, put the ladder up underneath them. And sometimes it can be as complex as somebody even rappelling down and performing a suspended pickoff. But there are hundreds, if not thousands, of options for rescue. All right. And then lastly is education. We've only spent 30 minutes on this. This isn't really it's increasing awareness. There's a lot of information that can be given out about fall protection, anchors, use of the equipment. So I certainly encourage you to go back to your employer for the hands-on training and the specific elements. But you can see there's all of these little details: harness, connector, fall distance. Goodness, I didn't even talk about clearance, calculations here in this session. So it is important that you get training, talk to your manager, supervisor, or even the people if there's some little bit about the fall protection that you don't understand. It is a requirement, and you shouldn't be up there, using this gear incorrectly. Or we certainly hope you're not up there using the gear incorrectly. All right. So thank you very much, everybody. I would like to say that there are some resources available to you on Werner's website. All of the products that you saw pictures of or that I paid mention to here are on our website, WernerCo.com. If you are conducting training or you're looking for some resources, they can also be found there on the training page, as well as some training awareness courses that you can take through Werner and our partners as well. So at that, I hope you got some nugget of information. You can bring me back to my home screen and I'll take any questions and review any questions that are there. Forgive me, I'm just bringing up my chat screens. Just taking a second to load. There we go. All right, thank you very much for the kind words. Clara, I'm not seeing any comments. However, my computer's just glitching a little bit. Do you have any that come through on your end?
No, Kevin, it looks like there aren't any questions. Guys, if you would like to ask a question before we head out for the evening, please be sure to type that in the chat now.
Great. Thank you, Clara. Well, thank you very much, everybody. At that, we can close it out. We appreciate your attendance and thank you very much for participating.